The blood drained from Lillian Monroe's face as the barrel of a Colt pressed against her temple. Cold steel threatening to snuff out her life in the crowded saloon that had fallen deathly silent. It was 1875 in Del Rio, Texas, a dusty border town where the law was as flexible as a gambler's morals. And tonight, her fate hung on the whim of a man with dead eyes and liquor-soaked breath. "I said give me the damn money," growled Harlan Pike, the notorious outlaw whose face was plastered on wanted posters throughout the territory. His calloused finger twitched against the trigger as Lillian stood frozen behind the bar, her hands trembling against the worn wood. "I ain't asking again, pretty lady." Lillian had taken the bartending job at the Painted Stallion just 3 weeks prior, desperate for work after her father's ranch had been lost to drought and debt. At 22, she was trying to scrape together enough money to start fresh somewhere civilized, somewhere a woman could make a respectable living. Now, it seemed, she might not live to see tomorrow's sunrise. "The lady doesn't appear interested in your proposal," came a deep voice from the far end of the bar. The room, already quiet, seemed to hold its collective breath as a tall figure moved through the haze of tobacco smoke. His spurs clinked rhythmically against the floorboards, the only sound besides the faint creaking of the ceiling fans. Lucas Lawton stepped into view, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow in the lamplight. His eyes, the color of a storm-tossed sea, locked onto Pike's with an intensity that made even the outlaw hesitate. Pike sneered, pressing the gun harder against Lillian's temple. "This ain't your concern, stranger. I'm making it my concern." Lucas positioned himself deliberately between Pike and the door, his stance casual yet unmistakably ready. His duster coat hung open, revealing a worn leather holster and the pearl handle of his revolver. "Let her go, or what?" Pike's laugh was ugly, his grip on Lillian tightening until she winced. "You think you're faster than a bullet already against her head?" Lucas's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted a cold calculation that made Pike's smile falter. "Try me instead." The challenge hung in the air like gunsmoke. Several patrons edged toward the doors while others sank deeper into their chairs, no one wanting to be caught in the crossfire of what was surely coming. "You willing to die for a woman you don't even know?" Pike asked, genuine curiosity mixing with his contempt. "Are you willing to die for money you haven't even stolen yet?" Lucas countered, his hand hovering near his holster. Pike's eyes darted between Lucas and the exit, weighing his options. In that split second of hesitation, Lillian acted on instinct. She drove her elbow hard into Pike's ribs, simultaneously ducking as his gun discharged, the bullet splintering the mirror behind the bar in a shower of glass. Lucas drew and fired in one fluid motion. Pike stumbled backward, a red stain blooming across his dirty shirt, his eyes wide with surprise. His gun clattered to the floor as he fell against a table, sending glasses and a half-played card game scattering. You shot me," Pike wheezed, clutching his shoulder. "Be grateful I aimed there and not between your eyes," Lucas replied, keeping his revolver trained on the wounded outlaw as he crossed to where Lillian was crouched behind the bar, her arms covering her head. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his voice softening as he extended his free hand to her. Lillian looked up, glass fragments glittering in her auburn hair like strange ornaments. Her emerald eyes met his, fear giving way to a cautious relief. "No, thank you." As she took his hand and rose to her feet, the saloon's owner, a portly man named Gus Fletcher, emerged from the back room with a shotgun. "What in tarnation is going on out here?" "Just taking out your trash, Gus," Lucas said, nodding toward Pike, who was now being restrained by 2 burly patrons. "Lucas Lawton?" Gus squinted, recognition dawning on his face. "Well, thought you were still running with the Rangers down El Paso way." "Not anymore," Lucas replied simply, holstering his weapon. "Someone should fetch the sheriff." As if summoned by his words, the batwing doors swung open and Sheriff Thornton entered, his badge catching the lamplight. "Heard the shot from up the street. Lawton, is that you causing trouble in my town?" "Just the opposite, Sheriff," Lillian interjected, finding her voice. This man saved my life. That outlaw, she pointed at Pike, was going to kill me. The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he recognized the wounded man. Harlan Pike, been looking for you for months. He turned to the two men holding Pike. Take him to the jail, I'll patch him up enough to hang. As Pike was dragged out, cursing and threatening everyone in sight, the tension in the saloon gradually dissolved. Conversations resumed, albeit with more animation as the patrons dissected what they had just witnessed. Drink? Gus offered Lucas, gesturing to the undamaged bottles behind the bar. On the house, of course, Lucas nodded. Whiskey, neat. Lillian busied herself with cleaning up the broken glass, her hands still unsteady. Lucas watched her for a moment before speaking. You handled yourself well. Not everyone would have had the presence of mind to fight back like that. She glanced up, a strand of hair falling across her face. I grew up with 3 brothers on a cattle ranch. You learn to defend yourself or get trampled. Where are they now, your brothers? A shadow crossed her face. 2 died in the war. The 3rd moved to California after our father lost the ranch last year. Lucas accepted the whiskey Gus placed before him, downing it in one practiced motion. I'm sorry to hear that. Life happens, Lillian said, straightening up and brushing glass from her skirt. And sometimes it tries to shoot you in the face. A small, wry smile played at the corners of her mouth, surprising even herself. Lucas found himself returning the smile. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. Lucas Lawton, Lillian Monroe. She extended her hand, which he took gently. Miss Monroe, would you allow me to escort you home once you're finished here? After tonight's events, the streets might not be the safest place for a lady alone. Lillian considered his offer. The man had just saved her life, but she had learned the hard way that kindness from men often came with expectations. Yet something in his eyes, a sincerity, a respect, made her nod. That would be appreciated, Mr. Lawton. I finish at midnight. The rest of the evening passed without incident, though Lillian was aware of Lucas's presence as he nursed another whiskey in a corner table. Occasionally engaging in quiet conversation with Gus or acknowledging acquaintances who stopped by to clap him on the back or shake his hand. It was clear he was known in Del Rio, and from the respectful nods and friendly greetings, well regarded. As midnight approached, Lillian counted the meager tips in her apron pocket and sighed. Tonight's commotion had cost her. Most patrons had been too busy gossiping about the shooting to order many drinks. She untied her apron, hung it on a hook behind the bar, and collected her shawl from the back room. Lucas was waiting by the door, hat in hand. Ready, Miss Monroe. The night air was cool against her flushed skin as they stepped onto the boardwalk. The main street of Del Rio was quieter now, with only a few establishments still showing light through their windows. The stars spread above them in a brilliant canopy, untainted by city smog. I live just past the Mercantile, Lillian said, pointing down the street. It's not far. They walked in companionable silence for a few moments before Lucas spoke. How long have you been working at the Painted Stallion? 3 weeks, Lillian replied. Not my first choice of employment, but options are limited for a woman alone in Del Rio. And before that, I worked as a seamstress for Mrs. Whitman until her shop closed. Before that, I helped my father run the ranch. She glanced at him curiously. Gus seemed to know you well. Have you lived in Del Rio long? Lucas shook his head. I grew up here, but I've been away for years. Joined the Rangers after the war, spent most of my time along the border or tracking outlaws in the territories. And now, his expression turned contemplative. Now I'm reassessing. They reached a modest boarding house, its windows dark except for a single lamp in the entryway. Lillian paused at the steps. This is me. She looked up at him, her face half shadowed in the dim light. Thank you again, Mr. Lawton, for the escort and earlier, Lucas, he corrected gently. And you're welcome, Miss Monroe. Lillian, she returned, a smile touching her lips. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, an unspoken current passing between them. Then Lucas cleared his throat and stepped back, placing his hat on his head with a nod. Good night, Lillian. Stay safe. She watched as he walked away, his silhouette gradually blending with the darkness of the street. Only when he had disappeared from view did she turn and enter the boarding house. her mind replaying the events of the evening and lingering on the enigmatic man who had stepped between her and certain death. In her small room on the second floor, Lillian sat on the edge of her narrow bed and let out a long breath. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the evening finally ebbed, leaving her hands shaking and her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She had nearly died tonight. The reality of it crashed over her like a wave, and she buried her face in her hands. After several minutes, she composed herself and began her nightly ritual of undressing and washing her face in the basin of water she had brought up earlier. As she braided her hair for sleep, she found herself wondering about Lucas Lawton. There was something in his bearing, in the way he had faced down Pike without hesitation, that spoke of a man familiar with danger. Yet his eyes had been kind when he looked at her, his touch gentle when he helped her to her feet. Lillian blew out her candle and lay back on her pillow, staring at the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the thin curtains. Sleep would not come easily tonight, she knew. Not with the memory of cold steel against her temple and the echo of a gunshot still fresh in her mind. But alongside those terrifying recollections was the image of storm-gray eyes and the feeling, unexpected but undeniable, that she wanted to see Lucas Lawton again. Morning arrived with the persistent crowing of a rooster and the distant sounds of Del Rio coming to life. Lillian dressed in one of her two work dresses, the blue cotton with the darned sleeve, and pinned her hair into a simple bun. She had the morning free before her shift at the saloon, and she planned to visit the mercantile to replace some buttons that had come loose on her other dress. The boarding house's communal breakfast was a simple affair of porridge and coffee, which she ate quickly, exchanging pleasant but brief conversation with the other residents, mostly single working women like herself, along with a widowed schoolteacher and an elderly bookkeeper. Outside, Del Rio's main street bustled with morning activity. Wagons rolled past, carrying goods from the train station or headed out to nearby ranches. The mercantile was already open, its proprietor, Mr. Simmons, sweeping the boardwalk in front of his establishment. "Morning, Miss Monroe," he called as she approached. "Heard about the excitement at the Painted Stallion last night. You all right?" News traveled fast in a town like Del Rio. "I'm fine, Mr. Simmons, thank you, just looking for some buttons today." Inside the store, as Lillian was examining a tray of pearl buttons, the bell over the door jingled. She glanced up to see Sheriff Thornton enter, followed by Lucas Lawton. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of him in daylight. He was taller than she remembered, broad-shouldered in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his jawline strong and defined beneath a day's worth of stubble. "Miss Monroe," the sheriff acknowledged with a tip of his hat. "Glad to see you're none the worse for wear after last night's ordeal." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lillian replied, acutely aware of Lucas's gaze on her. "How is the prisoner?" Doc patched him up. "He'll live long enough to face a judge." Thornton turned to Mr. Simmons. "Need some tobacco, Sam?" As the sheriff moved to the counter, Lucas approached Lillian. "Good morning, Mr. Lawton," she nodded, suddenly conscious of her worn dress and practical hairstyle. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I was giving my statement to the sheriff about last night." His eyes, even bluer in the daylight, assessed her carefully. "You look well." "I am, thank you." She selected a few buttons and closed her hand around them. "And you, no ill effects from your heroics?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. None. An awkward silence fell between them, filled with things unsaid. Lillian broke it first. "I should pay for these and be going. I have errands before my shift." "Actually," Lucas said, his voice lowering slightly, "I was hoping to speak with you. Would you allow me to buy you a cup of coffee at the cafe?" Lillian hesitated. In a town like Del Rio, being seen in a cafe with a man would start tongues wagging. But then again, after last night's events, she was likely already the subject of gossip. "All right," she agreed. "Let me pay for these first." 10 minutes later, they were seated at a small table in Maggie's cafe, steaming cups of coffee before them. The cafe was busy with the morning rush, the clatter of cutlery and hum of conversation providing a measure of privacy. "I wanted to check on you," Lucas said after their coffee had been served. Last night was intense. Sometimes the shock doesn't hit until later. Lillian warmed her hands around her cup. I admit I didn't sleep well, but I've faced hard things before. The ranch, he prompted. She nodded. Drought took our cattle, debt took the land. My father. She paused, the pain still fresh. He couldn't bear it, rode out one morning and never came back. They found his horse by the river, but not him. Lucas's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry, Lillian. The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. What about you? You mentioned you were with the Rangers. 8 years, he confirmed. Joined up after the war, thinking I could do some good, and I did for a while. But the longer I stayed, the more I saw that sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't as clear as I'd like it to be. So you left. My captain was killed 3 months ago during a raid. Good man, had a wife and 4 children. Lucas's gaze became distant. After we buried him, I turned in my badge, decided it was time to come home, figure out what's next. Lillian studied him over the rim of her cup. And have you figured it out? Not entirely, he admitted. I bought some land just outside town, my father's old place. Been fixing up the house, thinking about raising horses. Alone, the question hung between them, more intimate than she had intended. Lucas held her gaze. For now. The cafe door opened with a jingle, admitting a well-dressed woman in her 40s, her blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style beneath a fashionable hat. She surveyed the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to attention, her eyes stopping on Lucas with recognition and something more complicated. Lucas Lawton, she declared, approaching their table. I heard rumors you were back in town. Lucas stood, his posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. Victoria, good to see you. Victoria's gaze shifted to Lillian, assessing her with a quick sweep before dismissing her with a barely concealed sniff. I won't interrupt your breakfast, but do come by the house sometime. Richard would love to see you. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We have much to catch up on. With that, she swept past them to a table where several other well-dressed women were already seated, their curious glances following Lucas as he sat back down, an old friend. Lillian asked, noticing the tension in his jaw. Victoria Blackwell, her husband Richard owns the bank. Lucas took a deliberate sip of his coffee. We were acquainted before the war. The implication was clear, and Lillian felt a surprising twist of jealousy. I see. It was a long time ago, he said firmly, meeting her eyes. Things change, people change. Before Lillian could respond, the cafe door opened again, this time admitting a red-faced boy of about 12. Mr. Lawton, he called, weaving between tables. Pa says to come quick. That stallion of yours broke through the corral again. Lucas rose immediately, placing coins on the table to cover their coffee. I'm sorry, I have to go. That horse has been more trouble than he's worth. He hesitated, then added, would it be improper to call on you? Perhaps Sunday after church. The request caught Lillian off guard. Sunday calls were for courting, a clear statement of intentions that the whole town would notice. That would be acceptable, she heard herself say, a flush rising to her cheeks. Lucas's smile was brief but genuine. Until Sunday, then. With a nod to the boy, he strode out, leaving Lillian with her cooling coffee and the curious stares of Victoria's table. As she gathered her things to leave, Lillian couldn't help overhearing Victoria's carrying whisper. Former Texas Ranger taking an interest in a barmaid. How the mighty have fallen. The words stung, but Lillian held her head high as she passed their table. Whatever Lucas Lawton's past with Victoria might be, it was clear it belonged firmly in the past. And as for his interest in her, well, Sunday would tell if it was mere courtesy or something more. The next few days passed in a blur of routine for Lillian. She worked her shifts at the Painted Stallion, mended clothes for extra money, and tried not to think too much about Lucas Lawton or their upcoming Sunday meeting. The saloon was busier than usual, filled with customers eager to hear first-hand accounts of the shooting. Lillian found herself retelling the story until she was sick of it, though she kept certain details to herself, the way Lucas's eyes had locked with hers, the gentle strength of his hand helping her up, the quiet conversation as he walked her home. Saturday evening brought an unexpected visitor to the saloon. As Lillian was serving drinks to a table of ranch hands, the batwing doors swung open to admit Victoria Blackwell's husband, Richard. Tall and distinguished with silver at his temples, he was rarely seen in establishments like the Painted Stallion, preferring the gentleman's club at the other end of town. He approached the bar directly, ignoring the curious glances from the other patrons. "Whiskey," he ordered, his voice cultured and precise. Gus served him personally, showing the deference typically reserved for the town's elite. Richard sipped his drink slowly, his gaze eventually finding Lillian as she moved between tables. When she passed near him on her way back to the bar, he spoke. "Miss Monroe, isn't it?" Lillian paused, surprised to be addressed by name. "Yes, Mr. Blackwell. I understand you had quite the adventure the other night." His eyes, a calculating blue, assessed her with clinical interest. "If you call being threatened at gunpoint an adventure, then yes." She kept her tone polite but reserved. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And Lucas Lawton came to your rescue. How fortunate, indeed. You should know," he said, lowering his voice, "that Lawton has a reputation. Volatile, dangerous. Not the sort of man a young woman trying to establish respectability should associate with." Lillian's spine stiffened. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwell, Mr. Lawton saved my life. I believe that speaks to his character more eloquently than rumors." "Not rumors, my dear, facts." Richard set his empty glass on the bar. "Ask him about why he really left the Rangers, or about the men he's killed, or why he left Del Rio in the first place." He straightened his already immaculate coat. "Just some friendly advice from a concerned citizen." "Good evening, Miss Monroe." As he departed, leaving a generous tip on the bar, Lillian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Richard Blackwell's advice had sounded more like a warning or even a threat. What history existed between the Blackwells and Lucas Lawton? Sunday dawned clear and bright, the October sky a deep, endless blue above Del Rio. Lillian dressed carefully in her best dress, a dark green that complemented her eyes, with only one barely noticeable mend at the hem. She arranged her auburn hair in a more elaborate style than usual, securing it with her mother's silver combs. Church was as it always was, Reverend Clark's sermon on forgiveness washing over a congregation more interested in each other's business than spiritual matters. Lillian felt the curious glances and whispers, especially when Lucas entered just as the service was beginning, his tall frame conspicuous as he took a seat near the back. After the final hymn, as the congregation filtered out into the churchyard, Lillian found herself surrounded by a group of young women she knew, casually daughters of merchants and ranchers, who had always kept a polite distance from the barmaid in their midst. "Is it true Lucas Lawton is calling on you today?" asked Bessie Collins, the blacksmith's daughter, her eyes wide with curiosity. Before Lillian could answer, another girl, Martha Jenkins, chimed in. "My father says he killed more than 20 men during his time with the Rangers." "My mother says he broke Victoria Blackwell's heart when he left town," added a third, her voice hushed with scandal. "That's why she married Richard so quickly afterward." "Ladies," came a deep voice from behind them, causing the group to scatter like startled birds. Lucas stood there, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best but undeniably handsome. "Miss Monroe, if you're ready," Lillian nodded, relieved to escape the interrogation. As they walked away from the church, she could feel the weight of the town's collective gaze on her back. "I apologize if I've made you the subject of gossip," Lucas said once they were beyond earshot of the churchyard. "Del Rio would find something to gossip about regardless," Lillian replied with a small smile. "Last week it was Mrs. Peterson's new hat. This week it's us." "Us," Lucas repeated, the word sounding pleasant on his lips. "I like the sound of that." They walked along the main street, which was quieter than usual with most businesses closed for the Sabbath. Lucas led her toward the river, where a small park offered benches and shade from the Texas sun. "I thought we might talk without the entire town listening in," he explained as they settled on a bench overlooking the water. "Though I fear the damage is already done to your reputation." "My reputation as a barmaid wasn't particularly sterling to begin with," Lillian pointed out dryly. "Though speaking of reputations, She hesitated, then decided directness was best. Richard Blackwell came to the saloon last night. He seemed eager to warn me away from you. Lucas's expression darkened. Did he now? He suggested I ask you about why you left the Rangers and Del Rio. She watched his face carefully. I'm not asking out of idle curiosity, Lucas, but if there's something I should know. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the river's flowing current. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured. I left Del Rio 12 years ago because I had nothing to stay for. My father had died, the ranch was failing, and the woman I thought I loved had made it clear she preferred a banker's fortune to a rancher's struggles. Victoria, Lillian guessed softly. Lucas nodded. We were young. I was foolish enough to believe promises made in the moonlight. His mouth twisted in a self-deprecating smile. 2 weeks after I enlisted, she married Richard. I told myself it was for the best. And the Rangers, why did you really leave? His expression grew more somber. That's complicated. We were tracking a gang that had been raiding settlements along the border. Brutal men. They'd killed families, burned homes. He paused, clearly weighing his words. We cornered them in a canyon near the Rio Grande. My Captain Joe Hendricks, good man, as I mentioned, he called for them to surrender. They opened fire. Lucas's hands, resting on his knees, tightened into fists. In the chaos, I saw one of them making a break for it. I followed, caught up to him at the river's edge. What happened? Lillian prompted gently when he fell silent. He turned, and I saw he was just a boy. 16, maybe 17. Scared out of his mind, he had a gun, but it was shaking so badly in his hand. Lucas's voice grew distant. I told him to drop it, that I didn't want to kill him. For a second I thought he would, then a shot rang out from behind me, one of the other Rangers. The boy fell into the river. His eyes met hers, haunted. I couldn't save him, couldn't save Joe either, who took a bullet meant for me during the firefight. After that, I couldn't put the badge back on. Lillian reached out, covering his clenched fist with her hand. I'm sorry. I've killed men, Lillian, men who deserved it, who would have killed me or others without hesitation. I don't lose sleep over those, but that boy. He shook his head. Richard Blackwell would have you believe I'm some kind of monster. Maybe parts of me are, but I'm trying to be better. To build something good here. I don't think you're a monster, she said firmly. I think you're a man who's seen too much darkness and is trying to find his way back to the light. There's honor in that. Lucas looked at her with something like wonder. You have a generous heart, Lillian Monroe. Not generous, just honest. She gave his hand a gentle squeeze before withdrawing her own, suddenly aware of the impropriety. So, this land, you bought your father's old place. Tell me about it. The change of subject visibly relieved him. And as they continued their walk along the riverbank, Lucas described the property 50 acres just outside town, with good water and pasture. A small house he was renovating, and plans for breeding horses, starting with the troublesome stallion that had interrupted their coffee. He's magnificent, Lucas said, a note of pride entering his voice. Spanish bloodlines, strong and fast, just needs a firm hand and patience. Like most males, Lillian quipped, earning a surprised laugh from Lucas. As the afternoon waned and they made their way back toward the boarding house, Lucas asked, Would you like to see it? The ranch. Perhaps next Sunday if you're free. The invitation was significant more intimate than a walk through town after church. I'd like that, Lillian replied, finding she meant it sincerely. At the steps of the boarding house they paused. Several curtains twitched in neighboring windows, the town's curiosity undisguised. Thank you for today, Lucas said formally, aware of their audience. I've enjoyed your company immensely, Miss Monroe. As have I, Mr. Lawton, Lillian responded in kind, though her smile held warmth that belied the formality of her words. Until next Sunday, then. Until then. Lucas tipped his hat and departed, his stride purposeful as he headed back toward the main street. Lillian watched him go, a curious lightness in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. It was too soon, she told herself, to name the feeling taking root within her. But as she entered the boarding house, to the knowing looks of her fellow residents, she couldn't deny that Lucas Lawton had awakened something she had thought long dormant hope. The week passed both too slowly and too quickly for Lillian. Work at the Painted Stallion was busier than usual. with a cattle drive passing through town, bringing thirsty cowboys eager to spend their pay. She dealt with the usual propositions and wandering hands with practiced efficiency, though she found herself comparing every man to Lucas and finding them wanting. On Wednesday evening, she was surprised when Gus called her into his office at the back of the saloon. "Got a proposition for you, Lillian," he said, puffing on his ever-present cigar. "Madeline's leaving at the end of the month, heading to St. Louis to marry her sweetheart." Madeline was the saloon's bookkeeper, a sharp-minded widow who kept track of inventory and finances. "I'm sorry to hear that, but good for her," Lillian replied, puzzled by why Gus was telling her this. "Thing is, I need someone to take over her duties, someone who can read and cipher and won't steal me blind." Gus leaned back in his chair. "Noticed you're quick with numbers when you're tallying tabs. Ever done bookkeeping?" Lillian blinked in surprise. "I kept the ledgers for my father's ranch, but perfect. Job's yours if you want it. Less hours, better pay, and you won't have to deal with drunks pawing at you." Gus gave her a shrewd look. "Figure a respectable position might suit you better now that you're being courted by Lucas Lawton." Heat rose to Lillian's cheeks. "We're not that is, he's just—" Gus waved away her protests. "Save it for someone who hasn't seen the way you two look at each other." "Town's talking, but I say good for you. Lucas is a decent man, despite what some might say, so you want the job or not?" "Yes," Lillian said firmly, seizing the opportunity. "Yes, I do, thank you, Gus. Don't thank me, you'll earn your keep." He dismissed her with a nod. "Madeline will start training you tomorrow." Lillian walked home that night with a lighter step, despite her exhaustion. A better position, more respectable work, and improved pay, it was more than she had dared hope for just a week ago. And the thought that she might be able to hold her head higher in town might be seen as more than just a barmaid, especially in relation to Lucas. The thought pulled her up short. She was getting ahead of herself. One walk and an upcoming visit to his ranch didn't constitute courtship, regardless of what the town gossips or Gus thought. Lucas had been kind, had saved her life, had been honest about his past. But that didn't mean he saw her as anything more than a friend or a responsibility. Still, as she prepared for bed that night, she allowed herself a moment of dreaming of a life beyond the boarding house and the saloon, of a future that included a man with storm-gray eyes and gentle hands. Sunday couldn't arrive fast enough. After church, where Lucas met her with a warm smile that set tongues wagging anew, he escorted her to where his horse and buggy waited at the hitching post. "It's about 3 miles to the ranch," he explained, helping her up into the seat. "I hope you don't mind the drive." "Not at all," Lillian replied, settling her skirts around her. "It's a beautiful day for it." And it was. October had painted the countryside in golds and russets, the air crisp with the promise of the coming winter but still warm in the sunlight. As they left Del Rio behind, the road wound through rolling hills dotted with live oaks and the occasional cluster of prickly pear. "I haven't been out of town since I arrived," Lillian admitted, breathing deeply of the clean air. "I'd forgotten how much I missed open spaces." "City life doesn't suit you?" Lucas asked, guiding the horse around a bend in the road. "Del Rio is hardly a city," she laughed. "But no, I miss the land, the freedom of it. The ranch was hard work, but there was joy in it too." "That's how I feel about this place," Lucas said, his expression softening. "When I first came back and saw it again, something just settled in me, like I'd found a piece of myself I'd lost." They crested a hill and Lucas pulled the buggy to a halt. "There it is." Below them stretched a small valley, bisected by a creek lined with cottonwoods. A modest house stood near a cluster of outbuildings, a barn, a corral, what looked like a workshop. Several horses grazed in a fenced pasture, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. "It's lovely," Lillian said sincerely. "Your father built this," Lucas nodded. "With his own hands mostly. It was never grand, but it was home." He clicked to the horse and they continued down the slope. "I've been fixing it up these past few months. New roof, repaired the porch, replaced some rotted floorboards." As they approached, Lillian could see the results of his work. The house was small but well-maintained, its wooden siding freshly painted, windows gleaming. A porch wrapped around 2 sides, furnished with a rocking chair and a bench. Lucas helped her down from the buggy, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "I should warn you," he said with a hint of embarrassment, "it's a bachelor's home. I don't have much in the way of feminine touches." "I'm not here to judge your curtains, Lucas," Lillian teased, earning a relieved smile. A bark announced the approach of a black and white border collie who bounded up to Lucas with obvious delight. "This is Patch," Lucas introduced, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Best cattle dog in Texas, though he's retired now." Patch sniffed Lillian's skirts, then gave her hand a cautious lick, apparently deeming her acceptable. "He's beautiful," she said, kneeling to pet the dog properly. "I always wanted a dog, but Father said they were just another mouth to feed." "He's better company than most people," Lucas agreed. "Come, let me show you around." The tour began with the barn and corral, where Lucas introduced her to his small herd 6 mares of good breeding stock and the stallion that had caused such trouble at the cafe. "This is Diablo," Lucas said, approaching a magnificent black horse who watched them with intelligent, wary eyes. "Don't let the name fool you. He's not mean, just opinionated." As if to prove his point, Diablo snorted and tossed his head. Lucas held out an apple, which the horse delicately accepted, then allowed Lucas to stroke his nose. "He's magnificent," Lillian breathed, keeping a respectful distance. "Would you like to pet him? He won't bite, probably." Lillian gave Lucas a look that made him laugh. "Maybe next time," she said, though she was touched by the implication that there would be a next time. They moved on to the workshop, where Lucas showed her the saddles and tack he was repairing, then finally to the house itself. The interior was indeed simple but clean and orderly. The main room served as both parlor and dining area, with a stone fireplace at one end and a solid oak table at the other. A kitchen opened off to one side, and Lillian glimpsed 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. "It's not much," Lucas said, watching her take it all in. "It's a home," Lillian replied, "and a good one." Something shifted in Lucas's expression, relief perhaps, or gratitude for her understanding. "I've prepared a simple lunch if you're hungry." "Starving," she admitted. "I was too nervous to eat breakfast." "Nervous?" Lucas raised an eyebrow as he moved to the kitchen. "About coming here," Lillian felt herself flush. "About everything, I suppose. This is all new to me." Lucas paused in slicing bread, his eyes meeting hers. "It's new to me too, Lillian. There hasn't been anyone since I returned." "Since before that, honestly." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Lillian found herself moving closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his confession. "Why me, Lucas, of all the women in Del Rio? Because you looked at me and saw a man, not a legend or a villain." "Because you're brave and kind and beautiful," his voice lowered. "Because from the moment I saw Pike threatening you, I knew I couldn't let anything happen to you." Lillian's heart hammered in her chest as Lucas set down the knife and turned to face her fully. They were close now, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his eyes, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him. "May I?" Lucas's voice was rough with emotion. "May I kiss you, Lillian?" In answer, she rose on her tiptoes, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest. Lucas bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper. He drew back, searching her face for permission, then kissed her again with more certainty, his arms encircling her waist. Lillian had been kissed before, fumbling attempts by ranch hands that she had tolerated or rebuffed, but never like this. Never with this aching tenderness that made her feel simultaneously stronger and more fragile than she had ever been. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the night I walked you home from the saloon." "Why didn't you?" Lillian asked, her voice barely audible. "Because you deserved better than a man acting on impulse in the dark." His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. "Because I wanted to do this right." The simple lunch was forgotten as they sat on the porch, talking as the afternoon sun made its slow arc across the sky. Lucas told her more about his time with the Rangers, the good parts, the camaraderie and purpose he had found there. Lillian shared stories of her childhood on the ranch, her dreams of someday having a place of her own again. "I should get you back to town," Lucas said reluctantly as the shadows lengthened. "The gossips will have enough to talk about as it is." Let them talk, Lillian replied with newfound boldness, but you're right, it's getting late. As they drove back toward Del Rio, Lucas asked, "When can I see you again?" "Well, I have news of my own," Lillian said, realizing she hadn't told him about her promotion. "Gus has offered me the position of bookkeeper at the saloon. I start training tomorrow." "Lillian, that's wonderful." Lucas's genuine pleasure in her advancement warmed her. "You'll be excellent at it." "Thank you. It means better hours, too. I'll be working mainly during the day now with some evenings." She glanced at him shyly. "Perhaps we could have dinner sometime." "At Maggie's Cafe, if you're not worried about being seen with the saloon's bookkeeper." "I would be honored to dine with you, Miss Monroe, regardless of your occupation," Lucas replied with mock formality before his expression grew serious. "I care for you, Lillian. Not for what you do or don't do, but for who you are." The confession, simple as it was, filled her with a happiness that carried her through their return to town, their proper but lingering goodbye at the boarding house, and well into the night as she lay awake, reliving every moment of their day together. The following weeks passed in a blur of new experiences for Lillian. Learning the bookkeeping system from Madeline was challenging but satisfying work, engaging her mind in ways that serving drinks never had. She had a small desk in a corner of Gus's office, where she spent most days surrounded by ledgers and invoices, with only occasional forays into the saloon proper to check inventory or resolve discrepancies. Her evenings, once filled with dodging unwanted advances and enduring raucous patrons, were now often spent in Lucas's company. They dined at Maggie's Cafe twice a week, walked along the river on pleasant evenings, and on Sundays, after church, she would accompany him back to the ranch, where their courtship blossomed away from the town's watchful eyes. November brought cooler weather and the first stirrings of holiday preparations in Del Rio. The mercantile displayed Christmas goods, and Maggie's Cafe offered spiced cider alongside its regular fare. Lillian found herself looking forward to the season in a way she hadn't since her father's death. "Will you attend the Harvest Festival?" Lucas asked one evening as they sat in a corner of the cafe. "It's next Saturday at the town hall." "I hadn't thought about it," Lillian admitted. "I've never gone before. It always seemed like an event for families and established couples." "Well, I'd say we're fairly established at this point," Lucas pointed out with a smile. "Unless you've been courting some other former ranger when I'm not looking," Lillian laughed, drawing curious glances from nearby diners. Public displays of affection were still new to her, especially with Lucas, who was typically reserved in town. "I accept your invitation, sir, though I warn you, my dancing skills are rustic at best. Mine involve mostly trying not to step on my partner's feet," Lucas confessed. "We'll muddle through together." As they left the cafe, arm in arm, they nearly collided with Victoria and Richard Blackwell, who were just arriving. The moment of awkwardness was palpable as the four regarded each other. "Lucas, Miss Monroe." Richard's greeting was polite but cold. "Enjoying the evening?" "Very much, thank you," Lucas replied with equal formality. Victoria's gaze lingered on their linked arms, her expression unreadable. "Will we see you at the Harvest Festival, Lucas? You used to be quite the dancer, as I recall." "We'll be there," Lillian answered before Lucas could, her tone pleasant but firm. "Though Lucas warns me his dancing hasn't improved with age." A flash of something annoyance, surprise, crossed Victoria's face before she masked it with a smile. "How charming. Well, we mustn't keep you." "Good evening." As the Blackwells entered the cafe, Lucas squeezed Lillian's arm appreciatively. "That was well handled." "I've dealt with worse than Victoria Blackwell's disapproval," Lillian replied, though in truth the encounter had left her unsettled. Despite Lucas's assurances that his history with Victoria was firmly in the past, the woman's interest seemed far from extinguished. The week leading up to the Harvest Festival was busy for Lillian. In addition to her regular duties at the saloon, she spent evenings altering her best dress, adding fresh lace at the collar and cuffs, taking in the waist slightly to make it suitable for the dance. Lucas, meanwhile, was occupied with a minor crisis at the ranch. One of his mares had fallen ill, requiring constant attention. "I'm sorry I haven't been able to see you," he apologized when he came to the saloon on Friday, looking tired but relieved. Starlight's on the mend, though. The veterinarian thinks she'll make a full recovery. I'm glad to hear it, Lillian said sincerely. How are the others? Healthy as can be. Diablo's even starting to tolerate me approaching without an apple first. He leaned against her desk, lowering his voice. I've missed you. The simple admission sent warmth spreading through her. I've missed you too, but we'll have tomorrow evening. Lucas's smile deepened the lines around his eyes in a way that Lillian had come to find endearing. I'll pick you up at 6. Wear something pretty. Are you implying my everyday attire isn't pretty, Mr. Lawton? She teased. You'd be beautiful in sackcloth, Miss Monroe, he countered, earning a blush that didn't fade until long after he had left. Saturday evening arrived clear and cool, with a crispness to the air that hinted at the winter to come. Lillian stood before the small mirror in her room, assessing her appearance with a critical eye. Her dress, a deep burgundy that complemented her auburn hair, had been transformed by her careful alterations into something almost fashionable. She had arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, with soft curls framing her face. A knock at her door revealed her landlady, Mrs. Winters, a kind widow who viewed her female boarders with maternal concern. You look lovely, my dear, she said approvingly. Mr. Lawton is waiting in the parlor, quite the handsome figure he cuts in his Sunday best. Lillian gathered her shawl and reticule, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. When she descended the stairs to the boarding house's small parlor, Lucas rose from his seat, his expression making her glad she had spent the extra time on her appearance. You're beautiful, he said simply, offering his arm. You clean up rather well yourself, she returned, taking in his dark suit and freshly trimmed hair. They walked to the town hall, which had been transformed for the occasion with harvest decorations, corn shocks, pumpkins, and paper lanterns strung from the ceiling. A small band played at one end of the room, and tables laden with food and drink lined the walls. It seemed all of Del Rio had turned out for the event, from the wealthiest citizens to the humblest workers. As they entered, Lillian was aware of the curious glances and whispers that followed them. While their courtship was no longer fresh news, their appearance together at such a public, traditional event was a statement of serious intent that wouldn't go unremarked. Punch, Lucas offered, seemingly oblivious to the attention. Please. As Lucas moved toward the refreshment table, Lillian found herself approached by Bessie Collins and Martha Jenkins, the same young women who had interrogated her after church. Lillian, you look wonderful, Bessie exclaimed with genuine warmth. That color suits you perfectly. Thank you, Lillian replied, pleasantly surprised by the friendly overture. You both look lovely as well. Is it true you're working as the bookkeeper at the Painted Stallion now? Martha asked, her tone curious rather than judgmental. Yes, for almost a month now. It's challenging work, but I enjoy it. That's impressive, Bessie said. My father says women haven't the head for figures, but I've always enjoyed mathematics. The conversation continued in this unexpectedly companionable vein until Lucas returned with their punch. The young women greeted him politely before excusing themselves with knowing smiles. What was that about? Lucas asked, handing Lillian a cup. I believe I've been provisionally accepted into respectable society, Lillian said with a touch of wonder. Apparently, being courted by Lucas Lawton and becoming a bookkeeper elevates one's status considerably. Lucas's expression darkened slightly. You've always been worthy of respect, Lillian, regardless of who courts you or what position you hold. I know that, she assured him, touched by his indignation on her behalf. But the world doesn't always see things so clearly. Besides, I'm not complaining. It's nice to be included for a change. The band struck up a lively tune and Lucas set down their cups. Shall we dance? Fair warning, I wasn't exaggerating about my lack of skill. I'll risk my toes, Lillian laughed, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. True to his word, Lucas was no expert dancer, but what he lacked in grace he made up for in enthusiasm. They stumbled through the first few measures before finding a rhythm together, laughing at their missteps in a way that drew indulgent smiles from older couples and envious glances from some of the younger ones. As the evening progressed, Lillian found herself swept into the community in a way she had never experienced before. She danced not only with Lucas but, at his encouraging nod, with the blacksmith, the doctor, and even Sheriff Thornton. She chatted with women who had previously only acknowledged her with stiff nods and accepted compliments on her dress and her new position with genuine pleasure. "You're blooming tonight," Lucas observed as they took a break from dancing, standing near an open window to catch the cool night breeze. "I've never seen you look happier." "I am happy," Lillian replied, realizing the simple truth of it. "Happier than I've been in a very long time." Lucas's eyes softened as he gazed down at her. Lillian, whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by Richard Blackwell, who approached with the mayor and several other prominent citizens. "Lucas, just the man we wanted to see. We're discussing the possibility of establishing a proper horse fair in Del Rio next spring. With your breeding program, you'd be a natural participant." Lucas's expression remained polite, though Lillian could sense his frustration at the interruption. "It's an interesting proposal, Richard. Perhaps we could discuss it next week at your bank." "Why wait? The committee is all here now." Richard gestured to the group of men behind him. "Surely Miss Monroe won't mind if we borrow you for a few minutes of business talk." Before Lucas could refuse, Victoria appeared at Lillian's side, a glass of punch in hand. "Indeed, I'll keep Miss Monroe company while you men discuss your important matters. We haven't had a proper chance to get acquainted." Trapped by social convention, Lucas exchanged a glance with Lillian that conveyed both apology and caution. "I won't be long," he promised, allowing himself to be drawn away by Richard and the others. Left alone with Victoria, Lillian braced herself for the conversation to come. Victoria sipped her punch, her eyes never leaving Lillian's face. "You've made quite an impression on our little community, Miss Monroe. Rising from barmaid to bookkeeper, capturing the attention of one of Del Rio's most eligible bachelors. It's almost like a fairy tale." "My life has had precious few fairy tale elements until recently," Lillian replied evenly. "But yes, I've been fortunate in my opportunities." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I wonder, though, if you truly understand what you're getting into with Lucas. He can be intense, passionate, but also distant, particularly when his demons come calling." Lillian stiffened. "I believe I know Lucas quite well, Mrs. Blackwell." "Do you?" Victoria's voice lowered confidentially. "Has he told you about the nightmares, the way he would wake up screaming, soaked in sweat, or about his temper, how quickly it can flare, how dangerous he can be when provoked?" "If you're attempting to frighten me away, you're wasting your effort," Lillian said firmly. "Whatever history you shared with Lucas, it's in the past, and whatever demons he carries, they're his to share with me if and when he chooses." Victoria's perfectly composed expression slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw and bitter beneath. "You think you love him, perhaps you do, but love isn't always enough, Miss Monroe, not with a man like Lucas Lawton." "That's for us to discover, isn't it?" Lillian countered, refusing to be intimidated. Victoria studied her for a long moment, then inclined her head slightly, as if conceding a point. "Indeed it is. I wish you luck, Miss Monroe. You may find you need it." With that, she turned and glided away, leaving Lillian alone with her thoughts. Lucas returned a few minutes later, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry about that. Richard has a talent for creating inescapable situations." "It's all right," Lillian assured him, deciding not to mention Victoria's warnings. "Did you agree to their horse fair?" Tentatively. "It could be good for the ranch and for Del Rio." He offered his arm. "Another dance, or would you prefer some air? You look a bit flushed." "Air, please," Lillian decided, allowing him to guide her toward the doors that opened onto the town hall's small porch. Outside, the night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. A few couples strolled along the boardwalk, but the porch itself was empty, offering a moment of privacy. "I was saying something earlier before we were interrupted," Lucas began, turning to face her. "Something important." Lillian's heart quickened at the intensity of his gaze. "Yes, I love you, Lillian Monroe." The words, spoken simply and directly, hung in the air between them. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you stood up to Pike, and every day since has only deepened that feeling. Tears pricked at Lillian's eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming joy. I love you too, Lucas, so much it frightens me sometimes. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. Don't be frightened, not of this, not of us. His thumbs brushed away the tears that had escaped. I want to build a life with you, Lillian, a home, a family, everything we've both been missing for too long. Are you asking me to marry you, Lucas Lawton? Lillian managed through her tears, her heart feeling too big for her chest. Not yet, he said, surprising her. When I do, it will be properly with a ring and perhaps not immediately after you've been upset by Victoria Blackwell. Lillian gave a watery laugh. You noticed? I saw her speaking to you. I can imagine what she said. His eyes clouded briefly. Victoria has never fully accepted that what was between us ended long ago. She made her choice when she married Richard, but she's not happy with him, and sometimes she looks back. She warned me about your demons, Lillian admitted. Your nightmares, your temper. Lucas's expression turned grave. She wasn't wrong. I do have nightmares sometimes, and my temper. He hesitated. I'm not perfect, Lillian. The things I've seen, the things I've done, they've left marks on me, but I swear to you I would never ever harm you, never raise a hand to you in anger, never make you fear me. I know that, Lillian said with absolute certainty. I've never doubted it. The relief in Lucas's eyes was profound. He drew her closer, his arms encircling her waist. So, Miss Monroe, since I'm not proposing tonight, though that day is coming sooner rather than later, would you do me the honor of another dance? With pleasure, Mr. Lawton, Lillian replied, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him softly before they returned to the warmth and light of the harvest celebration. The weeks following the harvest festival were some of the happiest of Lillian's life. Her position at the saloon was secure now, with Madeline having departed for St. Louis and Gus expressing satisfaction with Lillian's work. She had moved from the boarding house to a small but comfortable apartment above the milliner's shop, giving her more independence and privacy. Her relationship with Lucas deepened with each passing day. They established a comfortable routine dinner at Maggie's Cafe on Wednesday evenings, Sundays spent at the ranch, and frequent visits in between when their schedules permitted. Lucas was busy with his horses, particularly as winter set in and required additional care for the animals, but he always made time for Lillian. December brought the first real cold of the season, with frost etching delicate patterns on windows and the occasional icy rain making the streets treacherous. Lillian spent more time indoors, grateful for the warmth of her small stove and the cozy office at the Painted Stallion. Will you spend Christmas at the ranch? Lucas asked one evening as they sat in her apartment, sharing a simple meal she had prepared. I know it's still 2 weeks away, but I wanted to ask early. I'd love to, Lillian replied, touched by the invitation. Though we should probably attend the Christmas Eve service in town first, or Reverend Clark will be scandalized. Lucas chuckled. Agreed, we'll go to the service, then ride out to the ranch afterward. He reached across the table to take her hand. I've been thinking about what the ranch needs most. More stable hands, a better fence for Diablo, Lillian suggested teasingly. A woman's touch, Lucas said, his expression growing serious. Specifically, your touch. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I told you I would propose properly when the time came. I believe that time is now. Lillian's breath caught as Lucas left his chair and knelt beside her, opening the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond flanked by 2 tiny sapphires. Lillian Monroe, you came into my life unexpectedly, a bright light in what had been a long darkness. You've shown me what it means to hope again, to dream of a future instead of being haunted by the past. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Tears blurred Lillian's vision as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Yes, she finally managed, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, Lucas, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly, then rose to pull her into his arms. Their kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. It was my mother's, Lucas explained when they finally broke apart, nodding toward the ring. My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for the right woman. He would have loved you, Lillian. I wish I could have met him, she replied softly, admiring the way the ring caught the lamplight. When should we be married? Spring? I was thinking sooner, Lucas admitted. Perhaps January after the new year, unless you want a grand affair that requires months of planning, Lillian laughed. Nothing grand, no, just us, our friends, and a new beginning. She grew thoughtful. Though I should write to my brother in California. He might not be able to come on short notice, but he should know, of course, and there's something else we should discuss. Lucas led her to the small sofa, sitting beside her with their hands still entwined, where we'll live after the wedding. The ranch house is small, and while I've been making improvements, it's still rather rustic. It's a home, Lucas, our home. Lillian squeezed his hand. I don't need fancy things or a big house, I just need you. The look of love and gratitude in Lucas's eyes nearly undid her. Nevertheless, I was thinking we might add a proper parlor, expand the kitchen a bit, maybe a second bedroom for the future. The implication brought a blush to Lillian's cheeks. They had spoken in general terms about wanting children someday, but the reality that someday might not be far off was both thrilling and intimidating. That sounds perfect, she said sincerely. Though I hope you'll let me help with the work, I'm handy with a hammer. My practical bride, Lucas murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Is there anything you can't do? Cook a decent biscuit, Lillian admitted ruefully. But I'm learning. Their laughter, warm and intimate, filled the small apartment, a preview of the joy their shared life would hold. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Del Rio. Lillian received congratulations from people who had scarcely acknowledged her existence months earlier, and Lucas was subjected to good-natured ribbing from the other ranchers and businessmen. Even Victoria Blackwell, when they encountered her at the Mercantile, offered a stiff best wishes that seemed sincere if not enthusiastic. Richard, however, remained coolly formal, his congratulations perfunctory at best. Don't mind Richard, Lucas told Lillian as they left the store. He's still angry that I refused his offer to buy my land last year. He's been acquiring property all around Del Rio, and my ranch sits right in the middle of several parcels he owns. Why would he want your land? Lillian asked, curious. It's good for grazing, but surely there's plenty of that available. Lucas shrugged. Who knows? Maybe he just likes collecting things, land, businesses, people. There was an edge to his voice that suggested more history with Richard than he had previously shared. Preparations for the wedding moved forward quickly. January 15th was selected as the date, with the ceremony to be held at the small church in Del Rio, followed by a reception at the Painted Stallion, which Gus had insisted on hosting as his gift to them. Lillian ordered fabric for a wedding dress, a simple but elegant design in ivory satin that she would sew herself. Lucas began the promised expansions to the ranch house, hiring additional help to ensure the work would be completed before the wedding. Christmas Eve arrived clear and cold, with a dusting of snow that transformed Del Rio into something from a picture book. After the evening church service, where they received more well wishes from the congregation, Lucas and Lillian rode out to the ranch in his buggy, wrapped in blankets against the chill. The ranch house glowed with welcoming light as they approached. Lucas had arranged for his foreman, an older man named Henry who lived in a small cabin on the property, to light the lamps and start fires in both the main fireplace and the stove. Inside, Lillian was surprised to find the house decorated for Christmas, a small tree in the corner adorned with simple ornaments, pine boughs along the mantel, and even a sprig of mistletoe hanging in the doorway between the main room and the kitchen. Henry's wife must have helped, Lucas said, looking a bit sheepish at her delight. I wanted it to be special for you. It's perfect, Lillian assured him, removing her coat and gloves. Absolutely perfect. They settled by the fire with cups of hot cider, exchanging small gifts, a hand-knitted scarf from Lillian to Lucas, and from him to her, a beautiful leather-bound journal for her bookkeeping notes. "There's one more thing," Lucas said, disappearing into his bedroom briefly before returning with a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. "This is the real gift. I've been working on it for weeks." Curious, Lillian unwrapped the package to reveal a framed deed to the ranch. "Lucas, I don't understand. This is your property." "Look at the names," he instructed gently. Lillian's eyes widened as she read. "Lucas Lawton and Lillian Monroe Lawton, joint owners." She looked up at him, stunned. "You're giving me half your ranch. I'm giving us a future," Lucas corrected. "This way, no matter what happens, you'll always have a home, always have security. It's legally binding. I had Judge Wilson draw it up last week." Tears sprang to Lillian's eyes as the magnitude of the gift sank in. After losing everything with her father's death, the idea of owning land again, of having a true home that could never be taken from her, was overwhelming. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, running her fingers over their names on the deed. "Say you'll build a life with me here," Lucas replied, taking her hands in his. "Say you'll help me make this ranch thrive, fill this house with children and laughter." "Yes," Lillian said simply, setting the deed aside to embrace him. "To all of it, yes." They spent Christmas Day in peaceful solitude, cooking a small feast together, walking the property to check on the horses, and planning the future of their ranch and their life together. It was, Lillian thought as they sat before the fire that evening, the first Christmas in years that had felt truly like a celebration, a day of joy rather than a reminder of what she had lost. The remaining weeks before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Lillian completed her wedding dress with help from Bessie Collins, who had become a genuine friend. Lucas finished the additions to the ranch house, a larger kitchen, a proper parlor, and the promised second bedroom that made Lillian blush every time she saw it. On the morning of January 15th, Lillian awoke in her apartment for the last time, a curious mixture of nerves and excitement fluttering in her stomach. By sunset, she would be Mrs. Lucas Lawton, a name change that represented so much more than just a marriage. It was a new identity, a new chapter, a new life. Bessie arrived early to help her prepare, bringing Martha Jenkins and another friend, Sarah Taylor, with her. The small apartment filled with feminine chatter and laughter as they helped Lillian dress and arranged her hair in an elegant style, crowned with a circlet of small white flowers. "You look beautiful," Bessie declared as Lillian stood in her completed wedding attire, the ivory satin dress falling in simple, elegant lines to the floor. "Lucas won't be able to speak when he sees you." "Let's hope he manages his vows at least," Lillian joked, though her own voice trembled slightly with emotion. A knock at the door revealed Sheriff Thornton, who had agreed to escort Lillian to the church in lieu of a father or brother. "Ready, Miss Monroe?" he asked, his gruff voice softening as he took in her appearance. "You're a vision, if you don't mind me saying so." "Thank you, Sheriff," Lillian replied, gathering her small bouquet of winter blooms, white roses and sprigs of evergreen tied with ivory ribbon. "I'm ready." The church was filled to capacity when they arrived, a testament to how thoroughly Lillian had been accepted into the community and to the respect Lucas commanded. As the small organ began to play, Lillian took a deep breath and, with Sheriff Thornton at her side, began the walk down the aisle. Lucas waited at the altar, looking more handsome than Lillian had ever seen him in a new suit of dark blue. His eyes, when they found hers, filled with such naked adoration that she nearly stumbled. Only the sheriff's steady arm kept her moving forward at a dignified pace. The ceremony itself was a blur. Reverend Clark's solemn words, the exchange of simple gold bands, Lucas's voice strong and sure as he promised to love and cherish her for all his days. Lillian's own responses came from the depths of her heart, a commitment she made without reservation or fear. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Clark declared, beaming at the couple. "Mr. Lawton, you may kiss your bride." Lucas's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a public declaration of a private devotion that had grown between them since that fateful night in the Painted Stallion. As they turned to face the congregation, now introduced as Mr. and Mrs. Lawton, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception at the saloon was a lively affair. with Gus having closed to the public for the evening and transformed the space with white bunting, flowers, and tables laden with food and drink. The same band that had played at the Harvest Festival provided music for dancing, and it seemed the entire town had come to celebrate with them. Even the Blackwells made an appearance, Victoria offering congratulations that seemed genuinely warm for once, while Richard maintained his usual reserve. "I wish you both happiness," he said formally, shaking Lucas's hand, "and prosperity for your ranch." "Thank you, Richard," Lucas replied with equal formality. "Your good wishes mean a great deal." As the evening wore on, Lucas found Lillian in conversation with Bessie and drew her aside. "Ready to depart, Mrs. Lawton?" he murmured in her ear. "Henry has the buggy waiting out back." Lillian nodded, suddenly shy at the thought of what lay ahead their first night together as husband and wife in their home, in their bed. "Let me say a few goodbyes." After farewell embraces and good wishes from their closest friends, Lucas and Lillian slipped out the back door of the saloon, avoiding the traditional shower of rice and ribald jokes that would have accompanied a more public departure. The buggy, as promised, waited in the alley with Henry at the reins. "Congratulations, boss," Henry said, tipping his hat to Lillian. "Madam." "Thank you, Henry," Lucas replied, helping Lillian into the buggy before joining her. "We appreciate all your help today." The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them wrapped in their thoughts and in the heavy blankets Henry had thoughtfully provided against the January chill. Lillian leaned against Lucas's side, his arm around her shoulders, feeling a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that transcended physical location. At the ranch, lights glowed in the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney Henry's wife had prepared the house for their arrival. Lucas helped Lillian down from the buggy, but instead of letting her walk to the door, he swept her into his arms. "Lucas," she exclaimed, laughing. "You'll hurt your back." "Not a chance," he replied, carrying her up the porch steps with ease. "Besides, it's tradition. And I intend to honor every happy tradition with you, Lillian Lawton." Inside, the house was warm and inviting, the fire crackling in the hearth, a bottle of wine and 2 glasses set out on the table. Lucas set Lillian gently on her feet, his eyes never leaving hers as he removed his coat and helped her with her cloak. "Welcome home," he said softly, cupping her face in his hands. "Home," Lillian repeated, the word filled with all the meaning it had lacked for so long. "Our home." Their kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, filled with a desire they had kept in check during their courtship. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Lillian Lawton," he whispered. "More than I ever thought it possible to love another person." "Show me," she replied, her voice steady despite the blush that colored her cheeks. "Show me how much you love me, Lucas." He needed no further invitation. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness of their bedroom, the fire burning low in the small hearth, Lillian traced the contours of Lucas's face with gentle fingers. "Happy?" she asked softly. "Beyond words," he replied, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "And you?" "I never knew it was possible to feel this way," she admitted. "Like my heart is so full it might burst." Lucas drew her closer, his arms encircling her protectively. "This is just the beginning, Lillian, just the first day of our life together." As she drifted towards sleep in the embrace of her husband, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the fear and desperation of that night at the Painted Stallion, when a cold gun barrel pressed against her temple, to the safety and love she now knew in Lucas's arms, it was a path she could never have imagined. "Try me instead," he had said to Harlan Pike, stepping between her and certain death. He couldn't have known then that he was also stepping into her heart, into her future, into a love story that would define them both. Outside their window, stars glittered in the clear Texas sky, witnesses to promises made and kept, to a love born in danger but nurtured in peace, to the beginning of a legacy that would take root in the soil of their shared ranch and grow for generations to come. In the years that followed, Lucas and Lillian Lawton built that legacy together. The ranch flourished under their combined care, with Lucas's expertise in horses complemented by Lillian's sharp mind for business. Their breeding program gained recognition throughout Texas and beyond, with buyers coming from as far as Kentucky to purchase their stock. Their first child, a son they named James Henry after both their fathers, arrived 11 months after their wedding, a strong, healthy boy with Lucas's gray eyes and Lillian's auburn hair. 2 years later, they welcomed twin daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, who filled the expanded ranch house with giggles and mischief. Del Rio grew around them, the small border town gradually becoming a respectable city. The painted stallion remained, though Gus eventually sold it to retire to San Antonio, and the new owner transformed it into a more genteel establishment. Lillian maintained the books for both the ranch and, as a favor to the new owner, the renamed Stallion Hotel and Restaurant. Victoria and Richard Blackwell eventually moved to Austin, where Richard's banking interests expanded, leaving Del Rio to younger, hungrier men. Before they left, in a gesture that surprised both Lawtons, Richard offered to sell Lucas the parcels of land adjoining their ranch at a fair price apiece, offering of sorts that allowed them to expand their operation. Through all the changes, the joys of parenthood, the challenges of running a successful ranch, the growth of their community, Lucas and Lillian remained devoted to each other, their love deepening with each passing year. The nightmares that had once plagued Lucas gradually faded, replaced by peaceful sleep beside the woman who had brought light back into his world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their now substantial home, watching their children play in the yard with Patch's descendants, Lucas took Lillian's hand the same way he had on countless occasions over the years. "Any regrets?" he asked, his voice deeper with age but still carrying the warmth that had first drawn her to him. Lillian looked at their entwined fingers, her hand now marked by years of honest work alongside his, the simple gold band on her finger worn smooth with time. She thought of the frightened young woman she had been, holding on to hope by the thinnest of threads in a saloon where her life had nearly ended. "Not one," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Not a single regret." As the sun set over their land, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lillian Lawton knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the greatest acts of courage, stepping between danger and a stranger, opening one's heart after loss, building a life from broken pieces, were rewarded with the greatest blessings. And for her, those blessings wore the faces of her husband and children, and carried the promise of many more sunsets shared in love, in peace, and in the home they had created together. The end.